mainly. So, good morning. Good morning. My name is Aurélien Orange for the Corax Foundation. Today we are having the third and last match of the group phase for two teams in the group E. This is the Inter-University Law Debate Tournament, 8th edition, and we have today the University of Birmingham and as well Durham University, both of them from United Kingdom, will be defending their positions about topics they received a week ago connected to international trade and the impact on, of course, environmental affairs as well. The students, of course, they prepared this topic during the 7 days, and they don't know, and we don't know, which position they will have for this match. So before jumping into the match, we will simply ask them to introduce themselves. I will ask Mr. Mudassar Shaban to introduce himself first.
Hi, I'm Mudassar Shaban. I'm a second-year law student at the University of Birmingham. Glad to be here.
Welcome. And we have as well in Durham University Miss Alice Neiligan. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Ailish, and I'm a second year studying law at Durham University.
Welcome. We have as well Mr. Michael Akhtar in the University of Birmingham.
Hi, my name is Mikhail Akhtar. I'm a second year law student at University of Birmingham, and it's great to be here.
Welcome. We have as well Mr. Ivan Slushenkov in Durham University.
Hello, my name is Ivan Sluchenkov. I'm a first-year law student.
Welcome. And we have Mr. Toby Greer in Birmingham.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Toby Greer, and I'm a second-year law student at the University of Birmingham.
Welcome. And we send greetings, of course, to your coach, Mr. Moir in the University of Birmingham, and as well your student associations on both sides. So on one side, for Durham University, greetings to ELSA, the European Law Students Association, and its board in Durham University, and on the side of the University of Birmingham, the Allsworth Club, who is supporting your team as well. So for this match, we'll have three judges. We send as well the thanks on our side for their time for assessing this match, and as well for sending during the next days the score sheets. The topic which was sent to the team was corporations must be legally required to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So now I will share my screen, and then you will know your position for this match. The team will be in favor, will be starting with the first introduction. So normally you should see the wheel with the double flags and as well as the logo of your institutions. So I will activate now the randomizer. So that will be the University of Birmingham will be in favor of the motion and will be starting the first introduction, while Durham University will be against the motion. So it means concretely the University of Birmingham will be defending the position that corporations must be legally required to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, while Durham University will defend the position that corporations must not be legally required to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So now you will have 5 minutes to review your notes, and then we will hear the introduction by the University of Birmingham. Here we are done with the 5 minutes of preparation, so it means we'll be able to start. Before starting, I remind everybody that when you receive the yellow card, it means you still have 30 seconds in your speaking time. You can't continue to speak, of course. When you will see the red card, speaking time is over. You can finish your sentence, but please do not start a new one if you don't want to be penalized by the judge. Voilà, so now we will be able to start with the introduction. So I give the floor to the University of Birmingham for your introduction. You have 4 minutes.
Good morning to Durham. The University of Birmingham firmly stands with the proposition that corporations must be legally required to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Net zero emissions mean a corporation's greenhouse gas emissions are balanced by an equivalent amount of emissions, removing or offsetting, resulting in no net additions to the atmosphere. Our argument rests on 3 key pillars. Firstly, legal mandates for corporate net zero by 2050 are crucial for meeting the Paris Agreement's 1.5-degree goal and averting irreversible climate change and existential threats. Secondly, corporations may prioritize profit over climate change without binding regulations, making voluntary efforts inadequate. Thirdly, diverse regulations create pollution havens and tech dumping, requiring universal standards for true emission reduction. Back to the first point. To align with the Paris Agreement's 1.5-degree target and prevent irreversible climate damage and existential threats, corporations must legally be required to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. The Paris Agreement's mandates limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees are pre-industrial level, beyond which irreversible consequences and existential threats to low-lying islands, public health, security, and public interests arise. Currently, we are 1.2 degrees warmer than the 1800s, necessitating 45-degree emissions reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050 to stay within the 1.5-degree limit. We are not on track with the COP28 summit, indicating that overshooting 1.5 degree is fast becoming inevitable, and 2024 seeing a record high emissions. However, achieving this target is possible with urgent and drastic action. Without clear, measurable, and legally binding targets, companies are unlikely to take the necessary action. It is important to clarify that net zero emissions allow for offsetting through carbon capture technology, voluntary carbon markets, and removals offsetting like tree planting. Furthermore, without legally binding frameworks and targets, The private corporations, particularly in profit-driven sectors like oil and energy, will prioritize short-term financial gains over long-term climate action, rendering voluntary efforts insufficient and delaying critical emissions and reductions. This profit-driven focus extends to state-owned enterprises, such as ST Energia, a global leader in oil, shale, and technology. This prioritization leads to significant climate change threats globally, exemplified by technology. This prioritization leads to significant climate change threats, exemplified by LA wildfires, which caused mass destruction and fatalities. Climate events like these will increase without corporate accountability for emissions. The necessity of binding targets is evident, as the voluntary corporate net zero pledges have been ineffective, with emissions continuing to arise, and only 19 of the 14,500 companies achieving net zero status. Finally, a crucial third point in the debate regarding legally mandated corporate net zero emissions by 2050 is that current patchwork of regulation fosters harmful pollution havens and technological dumping, necessitating universally enforced standards to ensure genuine emissions reduction rather than simply shifting the burden. The current lack of universal regulations creates pollution havens, where companies operate in countries with low environmental standards. A report on the 1,970 large international companies in 218 countries through the Carbon Disclosure Project discovered that companies currently are selling their older, less efficient or more polluting technologies to countries with weaker regulations. This effectively shifts the environmental burden rather than eliminating it. For instance, the introduction of the Environmental Protection Agency standards on lead production led to a rise of exports of industrial batteries to Mexico, demonstrating how strict environmental regulations in one area can lead to pollution being displaced elsewhere. It is therefore necessary that universal measures be implemented on corporations. For the reasons above, we defend the notion that corporations must be legally required to achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
Thank you very much. Now we hear the introduction by the team in Durham University. You have as well 4 minutes.
Thank you. This debate isn't about whether climate change.
Wait, I think. Yeah. Okay, we'll ask her to restart. So I did not. I stop, of course, the timer. Miss Neigan, there was a problem. There is a technical problem at this moment. So I think your internet connection is not ideal. So we'll ask her to start, and of course I will restart the timer. And then we'll hear the introduction by Miss Neigan. As soon as she reconnects, I will tell her maybe, because maybe she doesn't hear me. So when Miss Neigan will come back, we'll ask everybody to close the camera so she has more internet for her introduction. Yeah, Mr. Chulenkov, if you can tell her that she can reconnect. Miss Neigan. Miss Negan. Please reconnect if you can hear me. Yes, she disconnected at this moment. So we wait for her to come back, and of course we'll ask her to start again the introduction, and she will have 4 minutes. So in the meanwhile, of course, as mentioned a bit earlier, this afternoon the two other universities will have as well their match. So in order to do the last day 3 match of the group phase, University of Kansas, University of Botswana, and as soon as we'll have, of course, the results of all the judges for this group phase, we will first send the score sheets to the teams, and then we'll publish the results of all the match, first day 2 match, then day 2-3 match, in order to make sure that publicly as well it is known the status of the ranking in this group for the qualifications for the 8th of finals, round of 16. Yes, Miss Negan is back.
Sorry, I think I got logged.
Yes.
I think I got logged out. Did I finish my speech, or did I get logged out?
No, actually, it stopped just after 1 second. So it means we'll ask you to start from the very beginning with 4 minutes for your introduction.
Well, I apologize for that. I don't know why that happened.
No problem. It can happen, but indeed we can hear your introduction from the start as soon as you are ready.
Thank you.
So, I believe she froze. Yeah, I think she froze. No, yeah. Please, everybody else, you have to close the camera. And until she will start to speak, please do not open the camera. She will speak again, I mean. So, yeah, she got out. So when she will be back, I will ask her to start. Miss Negan, can you hear me? Miss Negan? Yeah. No, yeah, we can see you.
Where excessive government.
Yes, there's a problem with your internet.
Yeah, can I?
So.
It doesn't seem to be a problem with my internet. I have full bars.
Okay, please close the camera in Birmingham. Yes. So now I will ask you to start, and only you and me will be having the camera because I need to show the visual cue. So please start with your introduction. You have 4 minutes.
Yes, and apologies again. This debate is not about whether climate change is real. It is. Nor is it about whether corporations should take accountability, because they should. This debate is about whether we should impose a legally mandated, binding, net zero, one-size-fits-all net zero mandate upon corporations worldwide. And we say no, because doing so would cripple economies, undermine the free markets, and punish the world's poorest nations while ignoring the success of voluntary market-driven solutions. Let's be clear. Legally mandating net zero by 2050 would violate the fundamental principles of the free market. Governments don't own these businesses. They don't bear the risk of investments, and yet they now seek to dictate how corporations must operate, regardless of financial viability, technological limitations, or economic consequences. Historically, economies thrive when governments regulate wisely, not excessively. Overregulation kills businesses, stifles competition, and reduces innovation. Look at California Trucking Association and Bonta, where excessive government intervention in labor regulation led to business disruption and job losses. The same principle applies here. A top-down legal mandate would drive industries reliant on fossil fuels into the ground before alternatives are even ready. And let's talk about the economic cost. According to the International Energy Agency, reaching net zero by 2050 would cost $125 trillion in global investment, a cost that would be shouldered by businesses and, ultimately, by consumers. Who will pay when corporations pass these costs on? The working class, through higher prices and job losses. And unlike what the proposition claims, the market is already moving towards net zero without government coercion. Private investors and consumers are leading the transition, and they are doing so faster and more efficiently than governments ever could. Look at Microsoft, which has pledged to be carbon negative by 2030, or Tesla, which revolutionized the electric vehicle market, not because of legal mandates, but because of consumer demand and market incentives. Even BP and Shell are diversifying their portfolios towards renewable energy. Why? Because green investment is profitable. And when governments do intervene, flexible economic incentives work better than rigid laws. The US Inflation Reduction Act, for example, often offers tax credits for green energy. This encourages corporations to transition at their own pace without crushing them under the weight of legal mandates. We have seen voluntary action work in other industries too. The Montreal Protocol phased out ozone-depleting substances through not through corporate punishment, but through innovation. And this is a model which we should follow instead of heavy-handed laws. A legally binding net zero mandate would punish the developing world far more than it would impact wealthy corporations. Western companies can afford to invest in green technology for the most part. But what about countries and corporations in countries which are fueled by the fossil fuel industry as the backbone of the nation? Consider the Gabčíkovo-Nagymaros project case, where the ICJ ruled that sustainable development must be balanced with economic growth. Forcing net zero on all corporations ignores this balance and risks trapping developing nations in poverty and harming millions of innocent people in the process. And how will these mandates be enforced? A corporation in Germany might comply, but what about companies in nations without the infrastructure for renewables? Without a global enforcement mechanism, we risk punishing those least responsible for climate change while rich corporations find loopholes. We don't oppose net zero, but we oppose forcing it through legal mandates that crush economies, violate free market principles, and disproportionately harm developing nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I want to apologize again for my internet.
No worry. Thank you very much. Now we hear the first rebuttals. We'll start with the first rebuttal by the University of Birmingham. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. The opposition have argued that it is better for the market to create a solution to this issue at their own pace. However, the pace that the market is taking is not quick enough. Fundamentally, companies are profit-driven industries, and these regulations are necessary to meet existing environmental law commitments. It's clear that voluntary pledges by companies on net zero emissions haven't worked, and emissions are still rising. And at this point in time, only 19 of the Fortune 500 companies have net zero targets. The Morgan Stanley International Capital states that 84% of listed companies have no commitment to decarbonisation to net zero. They have also identified that 2/3 of listed companies are on a trajectory that would warm the planet by more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The opposition mentioned that the solution to the ozone layer was reached through innovation. However, this is fundamentally not the case. It was only possible to see the changes that we've seen with the ozone layer through international, universal requirements on all companies and all states, and we are seeing the ozone layer being repaired. They've also argued that overregulation stifles businesses, and they've mentioned the high cost that occurs in order to challenge climate change. However, the World Economic Forum estimates that by 2050, climate change will be costing between 1.7 trillion and 3.1 trillion per year. And whilst current regulations may not be sufficient to enable this goal to be reached, it would be possible for regulations to be implemented alongside government action that can help increase the financial benefits of investing in net zero initiatives, such as seen with the EU's Net Zero Industry Act. And I'd like to re-clarify that net zero does not require companies to have zero emissions, but by taking a combination of offsetting and reduction measures. Through these measures, it would be possible for this to be something that would be sustainable and economically viable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we hear as well the first rebuttal on the side of Durham University. You have 2 minutes.
While climate action is crucial, imposing a strict legal mandate is legally flawed, economically damaging, and practically unenforceable. The solution to climate change is not reckless legal mandates. We must pursue practical, enforceable, and economically viable solutions, not blanket requirements that risk legal disputes, economic collapse, and unfair burdens on developing nations. First, such a law would violate corporate rights and trigger legal disputes. Under the Energy Charter Treaty, corporations have successfully sued governments for climate regulations that harm their investments, as seen in RWE and Netherlands. If net zero laws are enforced, taxpayers may bear the burden of compensation claims. The claim that the free market is too slow ignores the rapid progress already happening without rigid legal mandates. Yes, emissions are still rising, but that is not proof that the free market is failing. It is proof that technology is still developing and an overnight transition is impossible. Second, there is no clear legal mechanism to enforce such a mandate. The Paris Agreement, our strongest climate treaty, only binds states, not corporations. Courts have also been reluctant to impose direct climate duties without explicit statutes, as seen as Friends of the Irish Environment and Ireland. Simply declaring net zero a legal requirement will not make it enforceable. Third, we have better alternatives. Courts have already held corporations accountable through tort law and human rights litigation. In Muley, Defancy, and Shell, the court ordered Shell to reduce emissions based on duty of care, proving that legal tools already exist. Instead of rigid legal mandates, we should expand carbon pricing, corporate governance reform, and financial incentives, solutions that are more adaptable and enforceable. A legal requirement is not the answer. Better legal and economic mechanisms already exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we hear the second rebuttals. We start first with the University of Birmingham. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Now, the opposition has argued that fundamentally the market the market is probably the best way to deal with the solution. However, as previously mentioned by my colleague, it's simply not the case, as only 19 out of the 500 companies are currently at net zero. Not to mention, the opposition have raised the argument that there are no current legal frameworks that allow for companies globally to mandate net zero by 2050. However, that's not necessarily what we're arguing. We're arguing that this must occur based on the fact that the situation right now is too dire. We've tried the nice way, we've tried the corporate pledges, the voluntary corporate pledges to get net zero by 2050. That's simply not the case in terms of working. It's not sustainable, it's not going to work. Also, where in terms of loopholes, the first speaker spoke to potential loopholes that corporations may take to get out of the situation of being mandated for net zero. If a sufficient legal framework is put in place universally, then these loopholes will be reduced massively, and this will result in companies being ordered to work and achieve these net results. And in terms of the ozone layer, as mentioned by my colleague before, this occurred through the universal regulation through states, not just the market alone. And it makes sense when you think about it. Universal frameworks, if they need to be complied with by corporations, and let's say they have low financial resources to comply with these measures, states themselves should be accountable and help those companies, as they're in a position where they essentially are able to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we hear as well the second rebuttal on the side of Durham University. You have 2 minutes. Yeah, you need to activate microphone. Yeah.
Sorry. A legally binding net zero mandate by 2050 isn't just harmful, but it's also deeply unfair. It assumes that corporations in all countries have the same ability to transition, but they don't. In wealthy nations, corporations can invest in green technology, but in developing nations where millions depend on fossil fuel industries, this would imposing a legally mandating net zero mandate would cripple economic development and drive up unemployment and pushing millions into poverty. Again, a legal precedent supports the position that we need to balance economic development and economic prosperity with sustainability, which through the Gabčíkovo-Nagimaros case. Let's be completely honest. We all know that that climate change is a massive existential threat, but net zero by 2050 is not realistic. Industries like aviation, shipping, heavy manufacturing are things that we rely on in our daily lives and for our economies. But at the moment, they do not have viable alternatives. Even developing nations are failing to meet their own climate targets. So if governments with vast resources cannot achieve net zero, then how can we expect every single corporation, including those in emerging economies, to comply? The proposition have stated that that corporations can just offset their emissions, but this is not really a feasible alternative, considering the vast degree and the high degree of emissions by many corporations. If legal mandates are imposed, they should be enacted at a national level where governments can tailor policies to their economies and their industries. A one-size-fits-all international mandate would ignore vast economic differences and unfairly punish nations least equipped to comply, while propping up nations who are already developed and have more options than currently developing ones. Instead of imposing an unworkable law that would destroy industry and deepen inequality, we should focus on market-driven solutions which do work. Climate action must be fair, achievable, and flexible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving to the conclusions, so I would like to give the floor to the team from the University of Birmingham for your conclusion. You have 2 minutes.
From the University of Birmingham, first of all, I'd like to thank the opposition for their opposing arguments. However, we simply disagree. Their predominant argument seems to be based on this base of unfairness, where essentially companies will suffer the consequences of this legal mandate to solve the net zero problems. I would argue that even though we could recognize unfairness on the basis that this may affect smaller companies more disproportionately. However, this issue or this climate issue is bigger than profit. It's bigger than company profit. It's a social responsibility that all people have to take, and that change requires measures to be taken that will result in potentially unlikable situations. And actually, the problem is there is no other way. We've tried the nice way already. This corporate pledges for voluntariness, it simply doesn't work. From University of Birmingham, we have argued that firstly, a legal mandate for corporate net zero by 2050 is crucial to meeting the Paris Agreement 1.5 degree goal. Also, we have argued that without binding regulations, companies will favour profit over climate action. As at this point in time, only 19 of the 4,500 companies have achieved net zero. Finally, we have argued that the present framework on the matter regarding net zero emissions results in harmful pollution havens and technological dumping on global areas where standards for emissions aren't as emphasised, thus requiring universal mandate. If we want to save our planet and mitigate climate change, the corporate world needs to play a huge role. The problem is a lot of these corporations are simply not willing to do so, and therefore the law has a significant social responsibility to force these corporations to take sufficient actions. As displayed by our arguments in this debate, there is a necessity if we want to limit climate change, which is clearly a global objective for all countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we hear as well the conclusion on the side of Durham University. You have 2 minutes.
The solution to climate change is not reckless legal mandates. We must pursue practical, enforceable, and economically viable solutions, not blanket requirements that risk legal disputes, economic collapse, and unfair burdens on developing nations. Such laws could disproportionately harm developing economies, where businesses lack the resources to meet strict legal targets. Imposing net zero requirements without considering technological disparities between developed and developing countries could widen economic inequality. First, the Paris Agreement does not impose direct corporate obligations, nor do most international treaties. Trying to enforce corporate net zero mandates creates legal overreach and exposes states to compensation claims, as seen in RWA in Netherlands and the Energy Charter Treaty. And the aforementioned matter of ozone layer, while it did involve international cooperation, did not require any legally binding mandates. Second, enforcement is unworkable. Courts have repeatedly shown that without clear statutory mandates, they cannot impose direct climate obligations. The proposition assumes legal precedent exists, when in reality most corporate climate cases are based on voluntary commitments or tort law, not enforceable statutory duties. Third, economically this law would backfire. The transition to net zero requires flexibility, innovation, and economic incentives, not rigid laws that would cripple industries, drive away investment, and cause economic instability. Market-driven approach like cap-and-trade systems and corporate governance reforms are far more effective than forcing compliance through legal mandates. Companies like Tesla, Microsoft, and BP are transitioning because of investor pressure and innovation, not legal coercion. Policies like Inflation Reduction Act prove that incentives work better than mandates. Fourth, net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unenforceable. Even wealthy nations struggle to meet their own climate targets. Corporations will evade these laws by shifting operations elsewhere, creating loopholes instead of solutions. We must pursue practical, enforceable, and economically viable solutions. Blindly enforcing net zero will not stop climate change. It will only shatter economies, deepen global inequality, and drive emissions into the shadows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we just heard both conclusions, so from now you are not under evaluation by the judge. So you can all come back in the room. I will collect your impression on this match, the topic itself, and the performance of your teams in this match. So I start first with Mr. Mudassar Shaban. What did you think about the match?
I think the match had a good flow to it. Our opponents, our colleagues at Durham, they did very well. I like the arguments. They had quite good case law, and it was something we contemplated. If we were to be the opposition, great minds think alike. I think we did very well as well. So the debate had a good flow to it. It was quite interesting to listen to, and it was Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Eilish Shonigan, what did you think about the match?
Well, I think I want to apologize again for my internet connection and sort of that interruption. But I wanted to say thank you as well to the Birmingham team, because I think it was a really, really interesting match, and I really liked their arguments. And I think that they presented them really well. So I thought it was very enjoyable in that aspect. I enjoyed the topic. I don't personally agree with the side I actually got put on, but I think it's a really interesting topic, and I thought it was very interesting to research about and actually see what the law at the moment is, rather than just like listening to moral arguments, which is usually what I think of when I think of this topic in particular.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mikhail Akhtar, what do you think about the match?
I think similar to her point, I'm just speaking on a personal basis here. I actually slightly disagree with the motion that we argued on, but I think it's interesting in terms of when you look at the debate more detail. When you look at the detail of the debate, it was literally state regulations or universal state regulations versus market regulations, and we were essentially arguing which one we thought was best and which one they thought was best either way. And overall the debate was really enjoyable.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sushenkov, what do you think about the match?
Yeah, I really like the debate. I really like the arguments that was made by the opposing team. Yeah, and the motion, as it was already mentioned, it was also very productive, I would say. Yeah, it created a lot of those arguments.
Thank you. Mr. Greer, what do you think about the match?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I thought our opponents were really good, and it's nice to be going against Durham, because I've been against them in some other competitions, so it's nice to be doing it here as well. And yeah, I thought that the motion was really interesting because there's so many different things that you consider, like the economic impact, but like so many different threads that you can bring in.
Thank you. Mr. Moar, coach for the Birmingham team and former participant last year, you reached the quarterfinals, if I remember well. Can you hear me, Mr. Moar?
Yeah, nice to be here.
Yes, what do you think about the match?
I think it's really, really good, and I think both sides are. I think it's quite an even contest, actually, in my opinion. I also think it's very dynamic, so I think I like how there's a good range of case law, but also I think teams were not just reading off what they've prepared, but they were making attempts to engage with both sides. I thought that was very interesting, but I thought also at some points the debate did become a bit about different states developed or developing, when the motion was quite clear that it's about corporations and the obligations that corporations or private companies should have. So I think teams could benefit from being more specific and being more targeted to the stakeholders that's involved in this motion.
Okay, thank you. Interesting indeed. So concerning this match, of course, you will get the free score sheets during the next days. And for the last part of this session, we'll zoom more into your preferred area of flow, just to know, because we have been already in two matches. This is the second one now, the third one, sorry, and of course, we'd like to know if among those topics that you have been researching on, are there some that you like maybe to research or to have a career about it, or you are preferring other areas of law which has not been debated yet in this competition. So we start with Miss Nelligan. What do you think? Is it a preferred area of law that you have been into during this competition, or you have other areas of law that you prefer?
Well, my primary areas of interest in law would be criminal and human rights law. And I think, like, especially in the international context, I think international criminal law and international human rights are very interesting. And I think, obviously, international human rights were engaged quite a lot in the past 3 debates, which was very enjoyable. Going ahead, like, hypothetically, if I were to go to the next round, I think it would be very interesting to hear what the next topics are.
Yeah. And of course, just to remind, in this competition, we can have indeed topics which are connected. Yes, many thanks, Mr. Moar. Yes, we can have topics which can be on comparative business law or international public law, or a combination of both, because it is taught in most of the law faculties everywhere in the world. So indeed, we might actually bring during the next stage indeed some ICL, international criminal law, international human rights as well, or even humanitarian law. So that might come, but of course we'll know on time about it. Same question to Mr. Greer. What do you think, what is, let's say, your preferred area of law? Is it among those that you already got, or other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really passionate about environmental law. But like the area of law that I'd like to go into specifically would be like immigration law, which I think is quite affected by environmental regulations, because it's a massive driver of like refugees and conflict. So like, out of the stuff we've done, I really like the environmental stuff. But like personally, I really am interested in immigration and refugee law.
Okay, yes, connected to human rights as well, human rights law. Same question, Mr. Slujenkov. This is preferred area of law that you already got, or you have others?
Yeah, I want to work in commercial law, so yeah, this motion was slightly related to it. Yeah, it was not completely about commercial law, but yeah, it's reached into it too.
Okay, yes, okay. So commercial law for you. On the side of Mr. Arta, is it a field you already like, or let's say you have other areas of law you prefer?
There's an area based on international dispute resolution that I plan on taking in my final year, and I like the whole concept of it. I like the practical realities of it, similar to debating in a way, in terms of how open-ended dispute resolution can be, and yeah, taking it outside of the courtroom essentially.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So yes, ADR, we have sometimes some topics through the years on alternative dispute resolution, arbitration, negotiation, mediation, but yes, maybe during the next rounds, indeed. And same question for Mr. Shaban.
Yes, I find environmental law quite interesting overall, but the area of law that I'm quite particularly interested in is criminal law. Criminal law is an organic, ever-developing area of law which is impacted by great aspects in it, and no criminal case is the same, and I find that really interesting. And I aspire to become a barrister in criminal law, and I think it's something that I'd really enjoy, and based on studying it, I think I am enjoying it right now. So yeah.
Okay, very good. So myself, I'm not expert in criminal law, but I have some colleagues who come from UK, by the way, to teach the students in The Hague. One is King's Counsel in London, I think. And so yes, our students in general, I mean, when you are in The Hague, this is a city of as well international criminal law. So we do of course a bit of comparative criminal law as well. So to see different systems, particularly of course between civil law countries and common law countries. So yes, of course, yeah, might have as well some topics around this during the next round. So that was actually a great debate today, and we will, of course, disclose as soon as we have all the results of all the judges, the score sheets to you, the students, and then afterwards we'll make the ranking of the teams. The two best teams of this group E will meet the two best teams of the group F. So group F will have actually their match today as well. So a very last question. I noticed that between Durham University and Birmingham, the University of Birmingham, there is 193 kilometers. So my question, in Durham, have you been in Birmingham already or not? And on the side of Birmingham, have you been into Durham or not? And as well, what are the clichés, if there are any clichés, I don't know, about the two cities? I think for Birmingham, I know one or two from the French perspective, but I will not tell anything. But I don't know anything myself in terms of cliché that you might have inside UK concerning Durham. So my question first to the Durham team. Have you been to Birmingham?
I have actually. I live in London, so it was it's not that far away from that. So it's quite easy to get there, and it's nice to get out of the city for a bit. I mean, Birmingham is also a city, but it's nice to get somewhere else for a change.
Okay. And same question on the side of Birmingham. Have you been to Durham?
I was actually there last week on Monday. I went for a wedding, and I met someone who's actually a law lecturer at Durham.
I've been to Durham for cricket matches for like club and district, but apart from that, I haven't really ventured much into Durham. So yeah.
Mr. Shaban? Hey, Mr. Shaban, have you been to Durham? No? Yes?
I did apply to Durham University, and I did get accepted. And it was I was contemplating between these universities, Birmingham or Durham. However, I live in Durham. I live in Birmingham, and I want to stay home for the flexibility. However, if this was not the case, I think Durham University would have been the place for me.
Okay, great. Mr. Shushenkov, I didn't ask you, have you been to Birmingham?
No, I have never been to Birmingham, but I would like to one day.
Okay. So in any case, that is an opportunity maybe to connect between the two student associations if you want as well to have some activities and events. On our side, of course, we can facilitate if needed. And I remind that in the second part of April, after the mid-April, we'll have a networking session, a midterm event as we call it every year, with all the teams. And this is a way as well for you to speak with all the other students around the world during this session. And we'll have some activities as well. And of course, we'll announce the 8th of finals match. So means who will be the opponents of who during that session particularly. Because it's a bit complex if you just deduce by the results of each group. But then at that time, of course, we'll tell based on the system we have, which is the same every year, who will be your opponent. If you finish first in your group, you will meet the second of the group F, so that at least you can try to deduce. And if you finish second in your group, you will meet the first of group F. But then when it comes to quarterfinals, then you will know in which part of the board you will be from the table. So in any case, that was a pleasure to see you discussing this topic, which is very, I would say, changing nowadays with what's happening in different countries, particularly in the US. But I hope that you learn as well about the current statu quo concerning legislations and conventions. And for the next round, so that will be 8th of finals, we hope for you, that will be again from another area of law. So many thanks again, and we keep in touch, and we wish you a great rest of the week, and you can watch, of course, what's happening in the other groups if you wish. Many thanks. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings in UK. Bye-bye.